I'm going to be talking about superstitions of a few different types. And first, let me tell you what fascinates me about superstitions. They were conceived in the childhood of our existence and the childhood of our cultures and our civilizations. And I think they teach us a lot about the way we think and some of the beliefs that shape our behavior even today. And I'd like to bring you back to my first superstition, the first one that I remember as a kid growing up on Long Island in New York. And it went like this: if you step on a crack, if you know it, say it. Exactly. In my neighborhood, it was more like if you step on a crack, you break your mama's back. And as a matter of fact, this was the first time that I had experienced the idea that a claim need not be substantiated in order to be believed by large groups of people, because everyone in the neighborhood was saying it, and I don't think I believed it any longer than it took me to get home and see that my mother's back was completely intact after all. And of course, childhood brings with it more superstitions. Not only that one, but I remember this one from picnics during the summer. If you swallow a watermelon seed, watermelons will grow in your stomach. And we tested this year after year, summer after summer, and it never came to fruition. Thank you very much. Here's a superstition that I think I first heard in childhood, but it gets dragged into adulthood, some of these superstitions. For example, that crazy things happen in human behavior when there's a full moon. The supernatural claims of religion come to mind. But it wasn't until moving to Japan that I realized that not all superstitions are exactly based on fear. Many of them come from tradition and history. For example, kitamakura, the belief that bad luck will befall you if you sleep facing north, because at a Japanese funeral, the corpse faces to the north. Yosume comes to mind as well. This one is based in language. Yosume, of course, means clipping your nails at night, and this has the same pronunciation as yosume, which means to die young, and hence the Japanese superstition. If you clip your nails at night, you're shaving years off of your parents' lives. Again, the fear of hurting one's parents. The belief in Japan and Korea and other places that blood type can actually influence your personality and your compatibility with others is not unlike the superstition, the superstitious belief in the zodiac and astrology that we have in the West, that these things, that your birth sign can actually influence your personality and your compatibility. And I think some cultures would like to believe that we're done with all this nonsense, that we no longer believe, and those who do are primitive or backward. But the numbers don't lie, and the numbers disagree in this case. Astrology, for example, most Americans, the North Americans that I talk to, don't actually believe that your birth sign can influence your personality or your compatibility with others. But of these self-proclaimed non-believers, most of them like looking up their horoscopes in magazines or newspapers. Now, the same thing goes for the full moon superstition. Most North Americans that I talk to do not believe that the full moon actually changes human behavior, but they like entertaining the idea that maybe it does. This is not different. In Japan, for example, the vast majority of Japanese do not really believe that sleeping towards the north will befall you any bad luck. However, they go through great pains to make sure that they don't sleep facing the north. And of course, the belief in blood type influencing personality, it is not a literal belief for most Japanese, but they enjoy talking about it. So what's happening with superstitions? I think the basic psychology can be broken down this way. Start with an unanswered question, a fear that you have, and suspend your intellect and your sense of logic long enough to believe in a false causality. That blood type influences personality. There is no causality there, but we shut down our sense of logic long enough to believe that there is. And I think that's the core of superstitious belief of all kinds, that we may not literally believe in these things, but we follow as if we do. And that's why it's possible for very smart people who did very well in their biology classes to believe that blood type, for example, influences personality. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of superstitious beliefs bleed into our professional lives as well. As a teacher, I care very much about this question. Is learning something best done in a classroom with textbooks and a teacher's instruction? This is the world model of education that we have. This is where the bar is set. Why do I say it's the world model of education? Because it's the model that developed countries have and that developing countries are hoping to achieve. This is where we've set the bar. And even just a very simple psychology of how the brain works is in conflict with this. For example, the left hemisphere of the brain, we know, deals with the bits and the pieces and the cogs of information, such as text, grammar, syntax, mathematics, but it's the right hemisphere that deals with context and helping the learner to relate to the outside world and making inferences. So how much learning can actually be done if we're keeping our students in the same context day after day, week after week? Learning is actually living. It's getting out there and it's interacting with people, with places, with new situations and environments. And I think the real tragedy of modern education, even in 2012, is that we put our students in a box and then we ask them to think outside of it. So learning is something best done in a classroom with textbooks and a teacher's instruction. How do the teachers feel about this? Well, university teachers in North America and Japan, most of them disagree with this idea, and a good thing that they do. So presumably, we teachers are bringing our students outside of the classroom every chance we get and introducing them to new situations so that right hemisphere of the brain can grow and grow. Unfortunately, the opposite is true. Most of these self-proclaimed non-believers spend either 0 or less than 10% of their study time outside of the classroom. So again, there's a gap in thinking. We, as teachers, we may not believe literally, but we do follow this belief as if we do. When my good friend and colleague, Kevin Ballou, came to me late last year and asked me if I wanted to help him organize a study tour for our international studies students at the university, I couldn't help but say sure, I'd love to. It was my chance to kind of test the boundaries of the classroom and break the spell and see what my students were capable of when they were taken out of that box. And I want to share a few images from that trip with you. Remarkable thing that took place was observable after the students came back. And in fact, even during the trip, students who were normally quiet in the classroom were suddenly talkative. There was a rapid transference of ideas between them as a group, and also from student to teacher that I hadn't witnessed before. There was a certain transparency established, not just between students and from student to teacher, but they were able to create a whole picture of their international studies classes and the content of their courses because they were experiencing it firsthand, which they hadn't before. And of course, there was a trust built out of all this. Again, not only between students and from student to teacher, but the students, I think, trusting their own choice of major and the courses that they were taking at school. And unfortunately, I think these false beliefs that get in our way, they're resorted to out of habit and ritual because the logic is not questioned generation after generation. And I think the working world, the business world, also has a similar challenge ahead of it. The designers of business believe that to get maximum performance out of employees, we should put them in an office in isolation at a desk and smack a computer screen up in front of them. Intuitively, we know this isn't true for everyone. And it's the designers of business that do believe this. We employees don't believe it, but we follow because we don't have a choice. Now, I'm inspired by offices that redefine the workplace. I think this is the model that we're kind of used to. I mean, when I look at this picture, I don't think about a flourishing of creativity. Do you? I don't think the gentleman sitting at the desk is flourishing. He might be playing internet poker. And with good reason, because it's probably a lot better than sitting in the box all day. Now, my proposal for redefining the workplace is similar to redefining the classroom. Simply take down the walls of the cubicles. Make it into a playground for the mind. Why would we not do this? This is the playground near my house in central Kobe. My son has a great time playing there. We take him there on the weekends, and when I'm at work, my wife takes him there. And it really is a beautiful place. It's a relatively new playground. And it really is a wonderful atmosphere for several reasons. Here's a bird's eye view. If you look on 4 sides of the playground, there are entrances on every side. It's what architects like to call a permeable space. You can come in, you can go out. It lives, it breathes. Moms and kids open their front doors and windows in the morning, and if they see their friends out there, they scurry out with their toys and they play. And wonderful things happen in this playground. There's a unique transference of ideas between the moms, between the dads, between the kids. Everyone learns something from each other. And this results in a kind of transparency. Everyone knows what's going on in everyone else's family in the neighborhood. This is not always a good thing, but it does happen. And there is a trust built out of this. There's a sense of trust in the community that cannot be replicated if the design were different. And then Monday comes around and we go back to work to this. And it doesn't feel very good. So I think if change is going to take place, and if we're going to make the workplace and the place of study a little bit more human-friendly, it's going to take a confrontation of the false belief and the fact that we tend to shut down our intellect and our sense of logic momentarily long enough to come up with this false causality. And I think if we're going to get past that point and have some positive change, I don't think we can wait one more generation and let this perpetuate. I think we would do best to confront it now and tackle it. That's you, that's me, right here where we stand.